right, well, good morning. It's good to see all of you here today. Before I jump into the message, just thinking about that song, God's Faithfulness, that His promises are true, and I'm thinking about that for all the folks down on the coast who have suffered and are suffering as a result of the hurricane, and we have certainly seen that played out over the news over the last several days, and I've been in touch with several pastors down on the coast, United Methodist pastors, friends of mine, just to see what's going on. And some of them are good. Their churches are fine and are intact. Some are not. Some are a total loss. And some will be rebuilding. But they're at work and at prayer right now. And what's really interesting is, I think to a church, they are all going to worship this morning. They are all going to gather in whatever mess there is down there, and they're going to worship. And they've all said the same thing, and the thing that we know very well is that church is not a building. Church is the people of God, and whenever they are gathered, they are the church. And so I just think it's awesome that today they're going to do that, and they're just going to say, you know what, God is faithful. And storm is not going to change who God is and who we are as the people of God. So, but we want to respond and do that well. So we wanted to just share with you a way that you can do that. UMCOR, which is the United Methodist Committee on Relief, is one of the best agencies at dealing with devastations like this, situations, storms, tragedies. And they've given us 4 ways to respond. So obviously we need to pray for them, and Pat's going to lead us in the prayer at the end of this service. Another way that you can help is by making a cleaning bucket, or what they call a flood bucket. If you go to our website, you'll find a link there to instructions about how to make a flood bucket, or there is a printed handout in the lobby on the shelf on your way out. You can pick one of those up. If you make one of these, just bring them back here to the church. We're going to make sure that all of these get to the coast. There's a church down there, Good News United Methodist Church. Brad Good, a friend of ours, is a collection point, and so we'll make sure that they get those flood buckets. You can make a donation to UMCOR. Again, the link is on our website. 100% of what you give goes directly to the area. So none of that gets siphoned off for administrative purposes or anything. All of it goes directly to the people who need it most down there. And they've all said, just wait before we go down. There's no power, there's no water, there's no gas. I mean, there's so many things that aren't available for anybody who goes down there. And more people who don't live there can be more trouble. That's more cars or more people that they have to work around. So everybody's just kind of on hold waiting to see what kind of needs they're going to have. And we're going to be in touch with our folks down there as we go through this. But anyway, just wanted you to have a way to respond. And if you have any questions, you can see me or see Pat, and we'll be glad to talk you through that. And but those are some tangible ways that you can give and be a part of that, okay? I went down Friday just to check on some family property that we have down in Ozark, which is down in southeast Alabama. That was just kind of right outside the center of the hurricane, and all is well there. But as I was going down and coming back on 231, it was just really, I guess, just heartwarming to see the amount of utility vehicles that were on their way down, many of them not from Alabama, from surrounding states, not from the area, people who were just flooding in to help. And you may have seen the pictures or videos of some of the staging areas for all the utility, just hundreds and hundreds of utility vehicles ready to go in and to help people down there. And then just watching the response, like on Facebook, social media, of the people who are trying to help, churches that weren't affected down there, who have said, you know what, we're going to do whatever we can to help our brothers and sisters, and so they're already staging and finding ways that they can help. And the body of Christ is coming together, right? That's what we do. That's why we're called the body. If one part of the body suffers, then we all have to help that part, right? And so that's how that works. And we're all individual members of the body. We've all been given a mission here, and we've all been given gifts and abilities and talents to be used in God's work here in this world, and we should use them. And because what we have, remember, God gave it to us. We didn't come up with it. Our life is not our own. What we have is not our own. God has entrusted us with all the things that we have in our life, and He's entrusted us also with the gifts and abilities that we have. We didn't come up with those on our own. It was God who gave them to us. He owns those gifts and abilities. Remember, this series is called I Own Nothing. He owns those and wants to use those to build His kingdom and to show His glory in this world. And so today we're going to continue with this series, I Own Nothing, as we talk about that principle, that idea that we started off with last week, that first of all, God is creator. We need to recognize him for who he is. He created this earth. He owns and created everything in the earth, and that includes us. He's the one who uniquely wired us up, put us on this earth, and gave us a mission to accomplish. Every single person is here for a reason. We want to make sure that we dial into that purpose that God has for us as we're serving him. And this morning, though, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about being a good steward of the gifts and abilities that God has entrusted to us. Steward is kind of that old-fashioned word that, that we sort of hung on to for a long time. It just basically means to be a good manager. To make sure that, that we're managing everything that God has put into our life well, and doing that so that God can use that to grow his kingdom. So that's where we're going to be today. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Matthew 25, 14 through 30. Matthew 25, 14 through 30. Now, I'm not going to have this on the screen. It's a whole lot of slides, so if you have your Bible, follow along with me there, or just listen. This is one of Jesus' parables that he shares, and that has everything to do with this whole idea of stewardship. So let me read this. Jesus says, "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more.' And his master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, so I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' The man with 2 bags of gold also came. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. 'Master,' he said, 'I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you.' His master replied, 'You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned it, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, which is never a good thing.'" Sometimes at the end of Jesus' parables, I'm like, he just seems mad. He's angry. Something got him riled up, and oftentimes he is. He's upset, and he's mostly upset with the Pharisees and Sadducees of the day, the leaders of the people of God in that day, who God entrusted the truth to them, and then they kind of abused it and lorded it over the people, and would teach them things that were not kingdom principles. And so Jesus would get upset with that and try to sort of course correct. And he would share stories, to say, listen, there's a particular way the kingdom works. There's a way that God expects us to do things in this life. And so we really have to pay attention to those, because it matters to how we minister to people and how people will see God at the end of all of this. And oftentimes when he's kind of rebuking the Pharisees and Sadducees, he talks about things in stewardship terms, how we're supposed to steward what God has entrusted to us. And he certainly didn't feel like they were, as leaders, stewarding well what God had given them. And so he's saying, listen, we have stewardship responsibilities as followers of Christ. We all have things that God has entrusted to us, so we have to steward those well. And so Jesus would use these parables or stories. A parable is just a fictional story that sort of unveils a truth, an important kingdom truth. And so that's what he's sharing here with us. And actually, in the NIV, you may have had a version of the Bible that doesn't use bags of gold, but talks about talents. In the original Greek in the New Testament for this story, the word talents is used, or the word talenton. That's the actual Greek word. And that word meant a unit of measure for a particular good, a currency, often money. That's how they measured gold or silver. And what's interesting is one talent in that day was worth a lot of money. Like some have said that in today's terms or today's standards, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars or maybe even $1 million by today's standards. So a talent was a whole bunch. And so when I look in this parable and I see the talents that were given to each of them was given a lot actually, even though one was only given one. And the talent, the bags of gold are actually a metaphor for the talents and the gifts that God has entrusted us with. So this is, well, it is about money, it's not about money, all right? And Jesus is trying to teach us something very important about what God has entrusted us with in terms of our gifts. And so he entrusts this one servant, it says the master did, with 5 bags of gold. And even though it wasn't said, it was implied that when I leave, you're going to do something with these bags of gold. You're going to make something happen with what I've given you. And he does that with the next one, with the 2 bags of gold and the 1 bag. Each of them had a responsibility to do something with what the master had entrusted them with. And when the master comes back, he would expect that they would have all done something with what he had given them. And sure enough, the one with 5 bags, did something. He made 5 more. The one with 2 made 2 more. The one with 1, though, and you think that in this parable that maybe Jesus was trying to have us focus on this one, did not do that, but buried it and was afraid because, well, what if I try something, I risk it, and I lose it? Then I have nothing, and oh my gosh, then what? So it's better if I just bury this thing, and at least he'll have something when he gets back, which misses the whole point of why he had given them something in the first place. The talents weren't theirs. They were entrusted with something that they were supposed to use. And when the master came back, there was an excuse given by the one with 1 talent. Well, gosh, I knew you were this kind of person, and so I thought you would at least want this back. And the master said, no. You were supposed to do like those other ones did and make something happen. It's interesting that, the whole idea of risk is what enters this part, that he didn't want to risk something. And I'm reminded that we've all been given a gift and a talent, and sometimes we might think that way, that it would be better if I just kind of didn't risk anything and put myself out there, if I just kind of held on to it, then I'll be good to go. And yet again, that misses the whole point. God has given us something, and he's called us to steward it for the sake of his kingdom. So we want to do that well, don't we? We want to make sure that by the end of our life that we have done something with what the master has entrusted to each one of us. And that's what Jesus' parable is all about. But within this story, there are also some teaching principles that we need to understand how to be good stewards of what God has given us. So the first thing is that good stewards do the work. The thing that was lacking in the story is the 1 talent person doing the work. He just buried it. What did he do when he buried it? While the other ones were trying to make something happen. And we've all been given the assignment to do something with our life, all the way back into the garden when we see Adam and Eve. That was like paradise, right? The garden was the perfect place. Well, in the perfect place, you know what happened? Work. They worked the garden. They worked that beautiful place that they had. God had given them the ability to work. That is the same for today. We've all been given the ability to work, to produce something, to care for ourselves, care for our families, but also not just for our careers and for a livelihood, but we've also been given a work to do in the kingdom. Sometimes our career and that come together. In fact, we should also leverage what we do as a career for the sake of what God is trying to do. But we have these abilities and gifts so that we can use them, and we should use them. We don't want to slide into the kind of thinking that's like, well, I'm saved. I mean, I'm good. How much more do I have to do, or maybe we tried a few things and they didn't go as well as we thought, and so now we don't do anything for the kingdom, and we think we come back to that sense of, well, but I'm saved, I'm good. It's kind of like I got my bus ticket, and I'm just sitting here at the bus stop waiting for the bus to roll in so I can get on the bus and go to heaven. And yes, our salvation, our faith is important, no doubt about it. But the book of James is very clear that faith without works is dead. That there is a fruit that is produced out of the faith that we have. And in this parable, there's an expectation that we will produce something with the life that God has given to us. You see? use those talents, use those gifts to glorify God and to serve people. And I think about John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. He's just full of all sorts of good quotes. I have two of them today. This first one says this: do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. Just like, don't stop. You know? Like, look around your life, look around your world and go, how can I do the good that God is calling me to do here? How can I do it there? How can I do it at home with my family, or at work, or on the soccer field, or on the baseball field, or wherever I'm at, there is some good that needs to be done there. And so for the rest of my life, I will seek those opportunities to allow God to use me, because there's also an economic principle here, a financial principle, that there's a compound interest that happens in the kingdom. It's like that whole thing where if you take a penny, and you double it every day for 30 days, like you have 1 penny on day 1, then you have 2 pennies on day 2, and then 4 pennies on day 3. Anyway, it's not rocket science, but anyway, you get what I'm saying here. But at the end of 30 days, do you know how much money you have with that compounded interest? $5.3 million. I had to look that up because I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing wrong? It's like, what? But there is a reality to compound interest that, it's like Albert Einstein said that was the greatest invention of man, is compound interest. But for us, when we do things in the kingdom, like when we invest and try and use our gifts and abilities, God takes what we do and he multiplies that. Yeah, there are times when we don't see the fruit of what we're doing, but that's okay. God does. God's making it happen on our behalf. And so we want to make sure that we are allowing God to multiply our talents, just like the first 2 servants, putting it on interest, letting it multiply. We want to make sure that what we are doing is doing the work so that God can multiply it. And then the second thing is, good stewards have everything they need to do what God has called them to do. We are here for a purpose, as I've said, and therefore we all have exactly what we need to do what God has called us to do. And I guess, when you read this story, you might be tempted to feel sorry for the 1-talent guy. Well, he was only given 1 talent. I mean, the other ones, if they lost 2 or 3, they at least have something, right? But this guy kind of had the burden. He had to produce something when the master came back, and you might think, oh, man, that poor guy, he kind of got beat up there at the end. But again, that would be missing the point, in that he had exactly what he needed to do what the master had called him to do, just like the other ones were given exactly what they needed to do what they were asked to do. It was all the same, essentially. So he was given more than enough to meet the master's expectations. And I think that sometimes we look into our life and we go, well, I just haven't been given a whole lot. I mean, look at so-and-so. They're just so much more gifted than me. Or look at those people over there like, wow, look at that. I just don't really have very much. Well, what do I have to give? And the truth is that we all have a very important something to give. And the process of really discerning that is praying, God, show me. If you're in a place where you're like, okay, I'm ready, well, God, show me. If you're not sure, come to me. I'll plug you in here at the church. We'll get you started somewhere. We'll start dialing that in. If Jill Harris were here right now, she'd say, come back here. I will find you something. Marcus is over there with youth. He'd be like, come to me. I will show you something. Anyway, we all have a place to serve and to give, and we don't want to underestimate that, and because it's God who's given it to us. No matter what we have, right? We're not that great. If we think we're great at some things, like, well, wait a minute, God's the one who gave you that. In Deuteronomy 8:17-18, it says, you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. He's talking about wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gave you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors, as it is today. God gave you the ability. 1 Peter 4:10, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. In other words, use what God has given you because you've been given something for his glory and for others' good. Third thing, good stewards are not all created equal. They're not all created equal. All of the servants in the story were given a particular amount, and it says, each according to his ability. The master understood that each one had particular abilities, and so they were given according to those abilities. But the fact remains the same. They were all given a mission and something that they were supposed to accomplish. So we all don't have the same gifts and abilities, and that's okay. That's a good thing, right? Because we're supposed to weave all that together. But to use Paul's analogy of the body, the nose, just because it's not a mouth, shouldn't get mad and say, I'm not a mouth, so I'm out of here. Jump off the face, run around. A nose running around by itself is just gross. So that shouldn't happen. No, the nose says, I'm the nose, like I do this, and the mouth does that, and we all work together for the sake of the body. Or you know what I mean? Dustin doesn't need to get jealous and upset at my musical abilities. I'm tired of this. I mean, really. Like I know, just overflowing with it, but it's okay, Dustin. You have okay. No, anyway. Trust me, hey, no musical ability going on this circle right here. So, but we don't want to look around and say, well, just, I'm not as so-and-so, or I don't have it. It's okay, like God has entrusted you with what you have because we're not all created equal. We've all been given some tasks, some abilities. Some are good at hospitality. Some of you are good at teaching. Some of you are great at working with kids. Maybe you're great at working with older people. Maybe you're great at whatever. I don't know, but you've all been given something to do, a way to produce in the kingdom, and we want to do that well and use whatever gift or talent that God has in particular given to each one of us. And then just this last idea, that good stewards work for the master, not for our own selfish purposes. Again, the money that was given to the servants was not theirs in the beginning. The original principle that they were given, that wasn't theirs. The interest that was earned for those two, that wasn't theirs. That they were given that to do something else with. And so at the end of the day, whoever we are, whatever we have is given so that we can do something for the master. So that we can do something for him that changes things on this earth while we are here. And I don't know, have you ever seen the 1978 version of the movie Superman? The Christopher Reeves, the real version of Superman back then? That one. Anyway, there's this, I'll just never forget this part in the movie. He's a teenager, he's in high school. If you've seen the movie, you remember that. He was managing the football team. Superman, with all of his amazing gifts and abilities and strength, is managing the football team because he can't reveal who he is yet. So he has to do things that make him look normal. And so he's a manager, and it makes him angry because he could do 40 million times what they're doing out on the football field, but he's a manager. And so he's upset. His dad comes to him, puts his arm around him, and and he says, listen. He says, son, you are here for a special reason. And I don't know what that is yet, but it's not to make touchdowns. And it's kind of like for us, you and I, we're here for this special reason. And it's not just to produce wealth. It's not just to raise a family. It's not just to do what we do on a week in, week out basis. There is a much bigger thing happening here, right? Thank you, Charles, brother. But we are in this bigger thing. It's like sometimes we just have to kind of like look up above our circumstances in our life and go, wait a minute, but God, the bigger thing, that's what I'm doing here. You know what that helps me do? Not get short-sighted and get stuck in these difficult circumstances. It helps me think long-term about what God is trying to come up with, a plan that he's putting together, a beautiful tapestry that he's going to weave out of a devastation on the coast. He's going to do it. And a lot of it's going to be done through his people in the church. And like God is up to something that is so much bigger than sometimes we give him credit for. But we're all here to be a part of that. A unique and special and important part of that. And so as people of faith, we don't want to be digging holes and dropping our talents in there and just saying, I'm just going to bide my time until he gets back. But we want to leverage everything that we have and all that we are, all that God has entrusted to us for the sake of his glory and this kingdom that he's trying to build here. Amen? All right, let's pray.